2025 in Singapore, hosted by Ripple. This is the official global community summit that unites developers, innovators, businesses, and investors for a 3-day-long celebration of blockchain and the XRP Ledger. I'm Jen Sanasi. It is my pleasure to be bringing you programming for the next 2.5 hours as we listen into the conversations that are being had on stage and talk to some of the top voices at the event right here at this desk. Now, for everyone watching at home on CoinDesk.com and CoinDesk's socials, I'm particularly excited to bring you conversations about meaningful adoption right here in Asia and beyond. You know, we spend so much time talking about speculative markets and hype cycles, but in many ways, we're seeing crypto and blockchain quietly become part of everyday life all around the world. Now, if you're wondering what we're going to be talking about, I think you're going to find that one of the dominant topics we cover here at the desk is going to be stablecoins. As legislation progresses in the United States, some of the biggest players in TradFi and crypto are advancing their stablecoin strategies, ushering us into the next era of finance. We're going to hear about folks who are talking to infrastructure players, they are issuers, they are firms that are working with some of the biggest brands in the world on integration of stablecoins for payments, remittances, settlements, and more. Now, we're also going to be talking about Ripple's bustling community and research initiatives. We'll even get a glimpse into the EZA Ripple Apex Hackathon that took place recently right here in Singapore. I believe 100 developers were there, so we'll talk to the EZA co-founders later on today and find out what went on there. Right now, we are going to head on over to the main stage for welcoming remarks, followed by a keynote presentation called Powering the Global Economy Through Institutional On-Chain Finance on the XRP Ledger.
$1 quadrillion worth of financial assets that exist in the world today, we're still really only scratching the surface.
I'm a huge believer in financial freedom that blockchain and cryptocurrency will bring.
The existing financial market is one thing, but there's a new financial market emerging as well.
Banks will integrate blockchain solutions to improve trust and transparency. DeFi will become the global infrastructure for traditional finance.
Interoperability is really at the heart of a full blockchain ecosystem where each chain can really do what it does best.
You know, it's such a privilege to see the things that people are building and to really engage one-to-one. It's not an abstract. It's here in this room. It's at this event.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. First off, welcome to Apex, the largest annual summit for the XRP Ledger community. We are so thrilled to have you here in beautiful Singapore. I'm Fiona Murray. I'm Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Ripple.
And I'm Adelia Tortman, Director of Corporate Adoption at XRPL Commons. And we have the absolute pleasure of being your co-host for what promised to be an extremely innovative and action-packed couple of days.
This is Ripple's 5th year hosting Apex. And every year, the energy, the innovation, and the momentum from the XRPL community only grows stronger. What's more, this year, for the first time ever, we brought Ubri Connect into the Apex program. Ubri Connect is an annual conference which brings together researchers and thought leaders from our university blockchain research initiative. Yesterday, the Ubri Connect pre-summit was held at the National University of Singapore. And today, we have Ubri professors both on the agenda and here in the audience. We're very excited about the collaborations that will be inspired by combining both Apex and Ubri Connect.
And we should also mention the official Apex 2025 Hackathon, which took place over the weekend and saw almost 300 developers, all competing for a prize of $30,000. This could potentially be the largest XRPL hackathon ever, and it sounded like it was a fantastic couple of days, so huge congratulations to the winners.
Now, back to this year's Apex. The agenda features over a dozen powerful keynotes and more than 70 breakout sessions to choose from, all led by pioneers contributing and building the future on the XRP Ledger. So, whether you're a developer, an entrepreneur, an investor, or a researcher, you're in for an incredible lineup of keynotes, of technical deep dives, of workshops, and networking opportunities.
And before we dive in, just a bit of a housekeeping. Lunch will be served next room at the canning room. And for all your cafe needs, please don't miss the XRP Cafe just outside the Partners Showcase. It's an excellent spot to reconnect and recharge.
And don't forget to download our Ripple Events app, your go-to guide for Apex. You can browse the agenda, find your way to different stages and activations, and even schedule meetings with other attendees. If you've set up a meeting, head over to the networking zone where we've set up a lounge space for you.
And we're also closing day one in style. So please join us tonight at Singapore's iconic Flower Dome for a night of celebration featuring a very special performance by Polo and Pan. So trust us, you do not want to miss this.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Absolutely.
Now, let's kick things off. Our first keynote features two familiar faces, David Schwartz, CTO of Ripple and co-creator of the XRP Ledger, will be joined by Jazzy Cooper, head of product for Ripple X.
They will explore how the XRP Ledger is enabling institutions to access liquidity, ensure compliance, and build more efficient financial infrastructure. From stablecoin and tokenization to lending and on-chain market, they will unpack how builders and institutions are reshaping and reimagining the future of finance.
If you're ready, let's give a warm welcome to David and to Jazzy.
Hey, everyone. Super excited to be here. The 5th year of Apex. 5th year Ripple's done it, 5th year I've done it. Welcome to everyone, developers, investors, students, entrepreneurs, representatives of institutions. Everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Super excited to be here. I've shown this slide at every single Apex. It shows that the XRP Ledger, the growth is real. It shows a shift and scale over more than 13 years. 3.3 billion transactions processed, 6 million plus active wallets, secured by more than 800 nodes and more than 180 independent validators. It's a proven track record of reliability and decentralization. But this is not, sorry. I'm so sorry. I switched slides too early. I apologize. So this is a shift that we're seeing. Institutions are moving from pilots into production. Yesterday, we had the announcement of digital commercial paper live on XRPL. Real assets are coming on chain. Commercial paper, treasuries, money market funds, stable coins. All of these things are happening today on the XRP Ledger. And this isn't box checking. This isn't another DeFi fad. This is a massive, massive opportunity. These institutions are adopting layer 1 blockchains because they see the advantages of the decentralization and the governance. These institutions will be innovation accelerators. They don't own the XRP Ledger. They don't want to run the XRP Ledger. They want to participate on an open blockchain. The trustworthy infrastructure brings more building blocks to more developers. The best example of this that we can all see clearly is stablecoins. There is not a more institutional product than stablecoins in existence. They're launched by institutions. Their direct customers are institutions. But we've seen billions of dollars of DeFi impact from these stablecoins. These stablecoins are used for collateral, for payment, for loans, in trustless ecosystems on public layer ones. Institutional products provide the tools for developers to build on top. And the XRP Ledger is evolving to support these real institutional financial use cases without losing its core values. The whole point is to provide tools that will enable the next wave of retail mass adoption DeFi. Joining me on stage is Jazzy Cooper, RippleX's head of product, driving our institutional DeFi vision. Jazzy?
Thanks, David. It's true, we're at a turning point. Public chains were once seen as too risky for institutions, and now it's too risky for institutions not to integrate them with their business. Institutions have truly embraced blockchain and are finally launching real products on public chains, including the XRP Ledger. And XRPL is evolving to meet that demand. Over the past year, a number of key features have gone live, ranging from the automated market maker to decentralized identity, price oracles, and clawback. And we have others that are still in voting: credentials, MPTs, permission domains. These features are foundational infrastructure for building secure, transparent, and scalable financial products. And we're not just modernizing finance, we're making it more inclusive, accessible, and programmable. And we're finally seeing real traction. XRPL is supporting real-world applications ranging from payments to yield generation, all decentralized and at scale. Let's take a look at what this growth looks like on-chain. David?
I've shown this slide at every Apex, twice at this one, apparently. But the momentum is real. This shows how the XRP Ledger has scaled for more than 13 years. 3.3 billion transactions processed, more than 6 million active wallets, secured by more than 800 nodes, more than 180 independent validators. This is a proven track record of reliability and decentralization. But I think you'll notice there's one thing on there that hasn't been on there before. There's something new on this slide. Jazzy?
Institutional adoption. It's here and now measurable on-chain. XRPL has finally broken into the top 10 chains for real-world assets, with nearly 120 million RWAs live on-chain today. Some examples include money market funds issued by Archax, treasuries issued by OpenEden, and now DCP by Guggenheim, the first digital commercial paper on the XRPL. Stablecoins as well. There's RLUSD by Ripple, USDB issued by Braza Bank, as well as legacy tokens like USD GateHub and USD Bitstamp. These aren't experiments. They're live, regulated financial products on the blockchain, and the pipeline ahead continues to be strong. DLD, the Dubai Land Authority, issuing their trust, Ondo's OUSG token, SocGen's Euro stablecoin. So now we'll take a look at why the XRPL. What makes it uniquely suited for these financial applications?
You know, I hear that a lot. What makes the XRP Ledger different? What is the XRP Ledger's purpose? Well, it was built for a purpose. Many blockchains were built for different purposes. Bitcoin, the first blockchain, designed to be digital scarcity, a store of value, a means of exchange. What can you do with the Bitcoin blockchain? You can hold and transfer Bitcoin. That's useful, but that's about all it does. Ethereum went completely in the opposite direction with smart contracts and open-ended programmability. It kind of made an app store approach for blockchain where you can build and launch your own applications from the ground up on the blockchain. The XRP Ledger carves a niche in the middle. It was designed in 2012 specifically for financial applications, focusing first on payments. The architecture prioritizes speed and reliability, low-cost transactions and predictable transaction costs, and seamless enterprise-grade integration. It wasn't trying to do everything, but it was focused on targeting real-world financial use cases exceptionally well. So what are those real-world financial use cases? Well, it built that core set of financial functions like issuing assets, sending and receiving payments, trading via DEX, credit origination, all at the protocol level. So there was no need for added layers, no need for developing smart contracts, none of the risks or costs associated with smart contracts. With fewer moving parts, fewer risks, and better performance, it was easier for developers. What did that look like? Finality of around 4 or 5 seconds. Fees way under a penny and predictable, and no protocol level breaches in more than 10 years. But beyond speed, the tools were significant as well. Built-in compliance tools like issuer controls, transfer restrictions, native aggregated liquidity through order books and now the AMM, growing cross-chain interoperability. Bottom line, institutions and retail developers get production-grade financial infrastructure, ready to integrate with simple APIs. They don't have to rebuild the stack.
To support institutional DeFi on the XRP Ledger, we're drilling into 4 primary verticals where we're looking to build.
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. Schumann Financial recently announced that it has integrated its euro-backed stablecoin with the XRP Ledger. Joining me now at the desk is Schumann Financial co-founder Eduardo Morrison Gomez. Hello.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure to meet.
Thanks for being here. We're sitting here in Singapore. You and I were talking before we went live, before we started this interview, about StableCon that you attended in New York. And I think it's important to start there because at the beginning of the show, I said, you know, I think a dominant narrative at the desk here today is going to be all about stablecoins. StableCon was a conference completely dedicated to stablecoins. Now we're talking about a euro-based stablecoin when USDC-based stablecoins have really dominated the headlines. Talk to me about some of the takeaways you're bringing from that event to this one.
Yeah, no, that event was incredible for us to attend. Particularly, we find very good narratives happening on two-sided things, like payments with a stablecoin-based payments, which is right now the main hot topic in the space. How can we basically integrate Europe for us on that transactional flow? There are 2 ways there. So there is corporate cross-border payments that are happening, particularly from dollar stablecoins to euros, where we can partner with these players in the US, particularly that are already sending stablecoins to euros, and we can be their designated partner in a compliant and being also properly able to process significant volumes for them in euros with direct SEPA channels. That's one. And the second one will be remittances flows, where there are a lot of aggregators in the space now using stablecoins to channel these type of transactions, where we can be also their partner. There are a couple of channels that are worth mentioning. For example, Euro to Turkey is a very big corridor. Then we have Francophone Africa to euros, and Latin America, particularly Mexico and Brazil, sending money back and forward from Europe. So we're very keen on partnering and trying to be a relevant player in the space for this.
Let's talk about these 2 use cases, and let's start with the first one you just outlined there. Corporate transactions, corporate global transactions and settlement. Talk to me a little bit more about what's happening now and the, I guess, problems in the existing financial system that this solves.
I can tell you a couple of things, right? So, and this is one reason why we're working very closely with the XRP team and Ripple, is because they are a payments-first company where we want to be there for them and partnering with them in order to be able to process these transactions in a quick and compliant way. So what is happening right now is, you know, there is a company sending money from SWIFT or having money in the dollar bank account, and they need to send euros or convert the currency to euros and send it to a bank account in Europe. That will take probably 2-3 days to settle if it's higher than 100K, which is the initial limit on the SEPA side. So how the stablecoins are participating in this space is basically that the SWIFT transaction gets converted into a dollar stablecoin of the client's choosing. Then there is a swap in the middle, which is currently known as the stablecoin sandwich. So it changes from a dollar stablecoin to a euro stablecoin in this case. And then we offer the off-ramping capacity on the SEPA side with high limits. So we can process up to 50 million on a daily basis with our banking partners, and that can grow significantly if we see the demand.
I want to talk about remittances in just a second, but this use case is interesting to me because when I think about all the stable coins that are popping up, I think about them being competitive with each other. And like I mentioned, you know, US dollar denominated stable coins are massive. And it sounds like you're not thinking of them as competitors, but rather collaborators for this specific use case.
I would say indeed, the dollar stablecoin space is the clear leader in the space, but we see Europe, and this is clear numbers, the euro financial market is the second global currency reserve. There is massive financial transactions happening across the European space, and we see that it's only growing. It's an only growing trajectory for euro stablecoins to be a participant. So we want to be one of them, being on the growth trajectory, and particularly with the dollar stablecoins right now. And we have a situation in Europe which is known as the MiCA regulation, where only MiCA compliant stablecoins can participate within the European Union. So we definitely see the dollar stablecoins as a, let's say, partner for us, all of those that are compliant already, in order to process transactions jointly on the FX on-chain narrative.
Now, let's talk a little bit about remittances. Talk to me about some of the existing challenges for folks who are based in Europe, sending remittances to places like I believe you just mentioned Turkey and some other regions outside of Europe. What are the pain points there?
I think the main challenge for this, imagine, there is a clear use case right now, which is African Francophone users that are based in Europe, that they want to send money back home to their families, right? So first pain point is collecting euros for these remittances aggregator companies. Then we offer them a proper banking solution for them to collect the euros via virtual IBANs. That's the first one. The pain point is collecting the euros easily and seamlessly for the users. And then it gets converted to the stablecoin, sent to Africa. And the second pain point is, okay, converting the stablecoin into the local currency, also in an easy way, in order for these users in Africa to get access to the local currency. So for that, we work with liquidity providers in Africa that offer that, let's say, conversion in a very cheap and compliant way in order to get access to the local currency.
For this use case, do you think, how are you thinking about education and onboarding users? Are you thinking about it as working with existing players and existing infrastructure like, you know, the MoneyGrams of the world? Like, how do you think about that education piece that comes with transitioning from one system to this one?
Definitely, at our stage in the company, we're working with multiple partners. We don't see ourselves as the remittance company that is going to send the money and have the access to the end users. We prefer to work with partnerships and end applications that have already massive user base in order to get a transition towards the stablecoin-based payments. So indeed, our goal is to partner with as much of these companies and grow from there.
So it really is building on the existing infrastructure and not displacing it. I think that's a really important thing to talk about when we're having this conversation about, you know, ushering in the next era of finance. It's not completely displacing what's already existing, it's making it better.
It's making it better and embedding the stablecoin solution within their own product stack. Like, the reality is that these companies, they have been spending years already building their user base, and we just want to offer a better solution for them.
Now, the news that I mentioned in my intro was that you partnered with XRP Ledger. I believe this launched last week. I think you said that like it really became a real thing just days ago or yesterday. Talk to me about why XRP Ledger for the launch of EuroP.
Indeed. So we announced our integration with XRP Ledger maybe 10 days ago, a week ago, and yesterday, we were able to add our first liquidity into the XRP DEX in order for any user of the ledger to transact with EuroP natively deployed on XRP Ledger. So it's an important day for us. Particularly our first pair there is EuroP to XRP because there is a lot of user base having XRP tokens on their holdings, and we want to offer them liquidity on that particular corridor or pair. So our view on XRP Ledger is that it is and Ripple in general is a company focused on payments first. They have been in the space for years now, and their main goal is to now grow on different aspects. So we're working with different players and companies that are building also on the XRP Ledger, where we want to be their main designated partner for on and off ramping in Europe, for settlement against the tokenized securities, RWAs, or different products that they're building on, and also on lend and borrowing. So there are a bunch of stuff happening in the ledger that for us on a stablecoin project, we can partner and grow.
I know before we started this interview, you said you have a bunch of meetings after you leave me at this desk to really strengthen some of those partnerships. Tell me a little bit before we let you go about that, about working with other firms, other startups, other companies in the XRP Ledger ecosystem.
I think it has been a very open and collaborative approach so far. Our main goal is to basically offer these firms and companies a very easy to integrate package for them to have a bank account in Europe through us, conversion to euro stablecoins, and then being able to trade in and out in a seamless way.
Eduardo, thank you for kicking the show off with me this morning. I think that was an incredible conversation to get the day started. I look forward to seeing you around the event later, and I hope you enjoy Singapore.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, that was Schumann Financial co-founder Eduardo Morrison Gomez.
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to off-ramps, to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
Earlier this year, Ripple acquired Hidden Road in a $1.25 billion deal. Hidden Road is one of the fastest growing prime brokers, offering institutions a one-stop shop of advanced services, including clearing, prime brokerage, and financing across foreign exchange, digital assets, derivatives, swaps, and fixed income. Joining this special edition of Markets Daily from Apex 2025 in Singapore is Hidden Road CEO Michael Higgins. Michael, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
All right, we are just kicking the day off here from Apex 2025. In my intro, I said, I think one of the big themes this year and one of the big themes of this event is the convergence of TradFi and crypto. And that's really built on this infrastructure conversation, on the stablecoin conversation that we just had here at this desk. I would love to hear from you, given your background. What are some of the gaps that still exist when we talk about the convergence of TradFi and crypto?
Yeah, certainly. I think those two worlds have already collided and are interacting. You're starting to see traditional markets improve tenures and move from 24/5.5 to slowly 24/7. But the key here is the ability to take collateral in a digital format and move that around on a 24/7 basis. In terms of where the gaps are, we're still very, very early on in the evolution of digital assets, or specifically on the crypto side of it. I'm a baseball guy, so I'd say it's probably top of the second inning. We have a long way to go. In terms of where those gaps are, first and foremost is certainty and clarity from our regulators on a global basis. You're starting to see the regulators get more involved, but you see divergence there. The second, I think, is just around the legal frameworks. In traditional markets, it's taken decades of time and energy from legal bodies to come together to put the right framework in there. We're just very early on in digital. I'd say the last piece of this is how we regulate it. I think we need to have a proactive, innovative approach like we did the early stage of the internet, as opposed to trying to shoehorn this into existing TradFi regs. So exciting, but early on.
Exciting but early on. I am not a sports gal, but I'm going to try and keep the baseball analogy going. So top of the second inning, I think we need to get 9. I was going to say that. Okay. What needs to happen for us to get to 9? You know, you mentioned regulation as a key part of the journey there. We're here in Singapore where we have MAS. We know that legislation is progressing in the United States. Our last guest was talking about MiCA. There are all these kind of fragmented advancements happening in regulation. So what needs to happen for us to get to that 9th inning and for everyone to be on the same page?
I think it's from a regulatory standpoint, the previous administration really had kind of the neck on the back of the knee on the back of the neck of this industry for a while. And so this new administration, since November has been very pro, digital assets and making good progress there. That is in the U.S., but global regulators look to the U.S., for good signaling. And so now you're starting to see more infrastructure come into play. The traditional banks have been sat on the sidelines and haven't been able to operate in this space. I think you'll slowly start to see those names come into the market in very specific ways on maybe custody side of things or repo for fiat collateral. And so those are main names that we need to see come into the place. Staying on the infrastructure side, this market is highly fragmented, so there's the ability to trade across dozens of end destinations, and so you need to really have credit providers step in to make that seamless to be able to trade across all of those. And then lastly is to kind of remove this risk or counterparty credit risk that sits in the system, a la FTX of the world, and you're starting to see these tri-party solutions where you hold your collateral away from you trade. These are basic infrastructure and building blocks that we've built in traditional markets that are already coming into digital assets, but those are some of the basic building blocks we need to move forward.
I'm going to keep it going. How are we going to identify a home run? What are the milestones
you already had one
that we need to hit? What was it?
I'll tell you what it was. It was the launch of the U.S. Bitcoin ETF. This is important for one reason and one reason only. It truly opens up the U.S. The U.S. is a very, very equity-centric market. So taking Bitcoin as a starting point and putting that into a regulated, acceptable equity format was really the last and final step for opening up the U.S. market. And you've seen that more recently with that ETF being the most successful launch, but now one of the largest in the world. And so I think that's the type of home run that you'll see, and you'll start to see more of those. Traditional names are able to get exposure to this asset class in many different shapes and sizes, whether it be the native, the native contracts or regulated futures on things like the CME, or more recently the security side of it. These are things where the market truly unlocks.
I want to build on the Bitcoin ETF a little bit. Recently, we heard from Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Balchunas that BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust has become the fastest fund in history to surpass $70 billion in assets under management. And it did it in less than a year, 341 days. Talk to me about how you read that headline, how you make sense of that, given that we're still so early, we're still only in the second inning.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's investors, walking kind of with their feet, right, and showing that they had demand for this asset class that they were largely suppressed from doing by just lack of certainty and clarity and no governance from regulators. And so certainly, again, in the U.S. at least, putting it into this regulated, accepted equity format really has unlocked that. If you compared that to gold, which Bitcoin gets compared to gold often as a store of value, it took the gold ETF, I think, over 1,000 days for that to happen, whereas you just mentioned, the Bitcoin ETF climbed to these all-time records, inside of a year, or just about over a year. And so it's clear that the world is starting to really value Bitcoin in particular as a starting point. And I think you're going to start to see this not only in investor portfolios, but in central banks, as those are generally the largest shareholders of gold. And so you've seen talk about this from sovereign wealth and central banks. I think we're starting to see the early stages of that.
That's really interesting. I mean, I want to build on the central bank narrative a little bit more. How long do you think that's going to take for central banks, the major central banks, to be holding Bitcoin?
I think you're actually starting to see it already. You're starting to see, the very large traditional institutions gain exposure to it. There are some sovereigns that are already putting this in their portfolio. If your question is, when in the U.S. are we going to put this into our reserves? I'm not sure. That's also asking me where the price of Bitcoin is a year. So I'll
the
refrain.
Audience loves it.
I'll refrain from making that bet. But I would say this. Bitcoin's characteristics, similar to gold, which there are large amounts of gold held in these reserves, are very, very similar. This is actually cheaper to purchase, easier and cheaper to store than gold. And so, with the world being geopolitically in a period of sustained inflation and protectionism, now I couldn't think of a better setup to hold Bitcoin as good collateral.
I want to talk a little bit about what clients want on the back of this kind of institutional conversation that we're having. What is it? What are clients telling you that they want to see when it comes to digital assets?
I mean, it's the basics, right? It's security, it's speed, it's execution. Ultimately, it's access. And as I mentioned before, the market is highly fragmented by nature. If I compare that to another asset class, it looks like foreign exchange. And so institutions have a fiduciary responsibility to be able to source best price. And so in order to do that, they need the infrastructure to do that. One of the things that are part of that infrastructure is a prime broker like Hidden Road. And so as a PB, we're really access providers, access to two things. One is access for the clients to trade across the whole ecosystem. And second is access to balance sheet to make that capital and cost efficient. And so I would say, going back to what institutions need and want, they want access, and generally they'll do that through prime brokers and ultimately underlying technologies and solutions like stablecoins, which we haven't really got into quite yet, but that really unlocks the ability to move that value or that collateral on a 24/7 basis, and that changes the way financial service works, risk management, and ultimately rewires the way commerce is transacted.
Now, I'm not going to ask you for a Bitcoin price prediction, but I will ask you for a prediction. If you and I meet again at Apex next year, so let's talk about a one-year framework. What do you see as what's going to change? How are we going to advance in 1 year when it comes to the things we've been talking about?
I'll stay thematically on the theme around the legal and compliance side of it and the regulatory side of it. And I think, in the United States, you're seeing lots of movement towards, more clarity and certainty, specifically the Stable Act and the Genius Act around stablecoins. I think that's an area to watch. So, watch that space. Next year, we might be talking about, more interest-bearing stablecoins, but the use cases of those stablecoins are clear already, and just seeing that, broader adoption.
All right, Michael, we are going to have to leave it there. Congratulations on that acquisition that I mentioned at the beginning of our interview. That is, I think, a massive, massive thing for not only you and Hidden Road, but this industry as we progress forward.
Many thanks, Jen, for having us.
That was Hidden Road CEO Michael Higgins. All right, we are going to take a look at what's going on the main stage right now. Let's head on over.
Zaldar is represented on the board of the XRPL Foundation to give the community a voice for everyone on the XRPL.
Robert, maybe you can kick off the conversation by sharing with the audience the vision for the new foundation.
Thank you, David. Let me start by sharing what drives us at the foundation. Our vision is what keeps us grounded, focused, and shapes the way we move forward. Think of it as you would of the North Star. It's always pointing us in the right direction and helping us move forward. The vision of the foundation, as written in the bylaws, is to promote and assist the community, as well as operations of the network, and support the XRPL ecosystem with the overall aim of ensuring that the protocol functions in an open and transparent manner. When we first came together in Paris about a year ago now, with everybody you see on the stage and other ecosystem members, it quickly became clear that everybody is on the same page when it comes to what the foundation basically has to do, what the vision should be. And you see that reflected here on the stage and in the audience as well. And it's not just about values, it's about priorities. And the foundation is here to make sure that the XRPL remains healthy, transparent, and operational, not just in theory, but in practice. That means supporting the people who build, maintain, and rely on the protocol every single day. It means infrastructure, governance, tooling, transparency, and above all, accountability. David, back to you.
Thank you, Robert. Well, it's good to set the stage with a shared definition of what a healthy protocol is. So in November, when we brought together a group of builders from the XRPL community to understand what it should look like. So this included representatives from XRPL Labs, XRP Scan, FreePay, Anodos, RippleX, and others. And we came up with this definition. So a healthy protocol must be reliable in both performance and safety. And XRPL's core infrastructure, especially RippleD, has proven resilient for over more than a decade now, even under high load or attack. Security is not just about encryption, it's about predictable behavior, quick recovery, and resistance to exploitation at all layers. A healthy protocol must also be trusted and transparent. Trust, not just in a social manner, but also technical. So the XRPL code base is open source, and every upgrade or amendment goes through a public process. So in a nutshell, developers and validators can inspect, they can audit, and they can contribute to the network's evolution, ensuring that it remains accountable and tamper-proof. A healthy protocol is also actively maintained. So the XRPL and the core client, which is called RippleD, and all the ecosystem of tools are actively maintained by a growing community. This includes independent developers, contributors from RippleX, and infrastructure-focused organizations like the XRPL Foundation. And a healthy protocol just don't sit still. They're actively monitored, improved, and supported over time. Luke, why don't you take over for the rest?
Thanks, David. So the protocol also needs to be innovative and remain competitive in the market. The XRPL has introduced two new features like native AMMs and batch transactions, proving that innovation doesn't have to come at the cost of stability. It continuously evolves to offer developers powerful new primitives without forcing breaking changes on users. It's sustainable. Efficiency is built into the XRPL's DNA. Its consensus algorithm is lightweight, requiring minimal energy, and transaction costs are measured in fractions of a cent. This means it's economically sustainable for both developers and users today and at scale. It's also decentralized. So what does that mean? No single entity can control the XRP Ledger today. Its validator network is diverse and globally distributed. Its open amendment process ensures that changes must be supported by a majority of trusted validators, not dictated from the top down. Healthy ecosystems don't live in silos. The XRPL is interoperable. It's designed to move value and data in and out through bridges, cross-chain protocols, and integration layers. Interoperability ensures that the XRPL isn't just a ledger, it's part of a broader, composable internet of value. Finally, we want to make sure this protocol and all of the great technology we've built is used. The XRPL has a healthy community today. There's over 6 million activated wallets. It has vibrant user demand across payments, NFTs, DeFi, and a wider variety of use cases. This adoption at scale creates network effects, builds resilience, and attracts even more builders. With that, I'll pass on to Matt to explain the Foundation's assets and what the Foundation's been getting up to for the last 6 months.
Thank you so much, Luke. So far we've talked about the Foundation's vision and goals for our protocol. But to fully understand what we do, let's get concrete. And let's look at some of the assets we manage to support our ecosystem. At first, we own domain names. Our newest is XRPL.Foundation. I invite you to have a look if you haven't already. And maybe you know this one, XRPL.org. This is the source of truth for our XRPL community. Maybe surprising for some of you, we also maintain trademarks globally, including the XRP mark. Of course, we also play a large part in maintaining open source code bases that power the network, things that we've mentioned like RippleD and several client libraries, such as XRPL.js. Not only do we maintain this, but we also publish them. We sign and publish and distribute these to platforms like NPM and PyPy, to name a few. And this is a wall of text. And this wall of text is very important. It implements the UNL, which is a trusted list of validator nodes that help the XRP ledger reach agreement and create new ledgers. The UNL is a key part of how the network stays in sync and secure, and publishing it is a core part of the Foundation. In short, we do what we need to keep the XRPL running smoothly, producing new ledgers as it's done every day for the past 13 years. And while the ledger is 13 years old, the foundation was recently formed. So at the end of 2024, we incorporated in France, and since then, we built the board you see here today. The board has set a clear direction for the future, protecting the core assets while collaborating and supporting a global community of node operators, developers, and the financial community that relies on XRPL. To date, we've transferred core assets such as XRPL.org, GitHub, and held our first infrastructure working group. There's many more to come, including a monthly town hall. So join us at XRPL.Foundation to follow our progress. Over to you, Fabio.
Thank you, Matt. Of course, none of this would be made without you, the XRPL community. What are we doing for the community here? What we will be doing for the XRPL community will be to support the community in 4 ways. We will build the tools and infrastructure. We will fund developers with grants and programs. And we will connect people through events, hackathons, and meetups. We will lead with transparency and community input. Last night, the ZaoDao hosted their first community event. And for me, this really highlighted how valuable it is when developers and community members can openly share what's needed and what's missing. This is what ZaoDao exists, to help close the gap and turn feedback into action. Now, I'll hand over to Luke.
Thanks, Xavier. So let's talk a little bit about how all of you can get involved today and contribute to the future of the XRP Ledger. So as we've said, the foundation exists to support the health and decentralization of the network. But that mission only works if the community get involved. We need all of your support here today. You'll see a few key working groups on the left. Some of these are already live. So the infrastructure working group, we had 50 participants come down and join. These are where some of the most meaningful contributions happen. It's where you can get your voice heard. And we're currently supporting active groups focused on core development and community as well. The infrastructure has everything to do with validator, coordination for data tooling and resiliency. And there's a few initiatives that we're working on to help really improve the processes. These working groups are supporting the background. You don't need to be a full-time developer. If you care about the future of the XRPL and want to help shape it, there's a seat at the table for all of you. On the right, we have a QR code that actually links to a waitlist for our membership program. So if anyone can get out their phone and scan the QR code, that would be great. I can't wait to see a number of you register to join the foundation. And think of this as a way to stay close to the foundation's mission, contribute to its sustainability, and get more involved in shaping the direction of the ecosystem. Membership isn't just symbolic. It comes with visibility into the foundation's initiatives, access to contributor channels, and the ability to propose ideas and vote on certain governance matters over time via the DAO and other means. So whether you want to write code, offer feedback, contribute infrastructure, or simply help strengthen the ecosystem from wherever you are in the world, we welcome your contribution. The health of the XRPL depends on active participation from all of you, and this is your invitation to be a part of the journey today. Scan the QR code, and I'll hand over to David to take us home. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. That was a quick tour, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the progress that we've made and where we are headed. So, excuse me, organizer, I will just go out of our script for 2 seconds, because this is an important step for the foundation and also for the community. This feels like it's the first step. So I want to make sure we remember this first step and ask the community to participate, because this is the message. I'll go ahead and take a selfie with the whole room if you allow me to. Okay, guys? So try to scoot in. Everyone, if you can give us a big smile, because you're on it. I will let Vet post that on Twitter because he has the reach we need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
And see you very soon.
Thank you, David, Matt, Luke, Robert, and Fabio. Well done. Now, let's turn to how companies are building on the XRP Ledger to further institutional adoption. Yesterday, we announced that Zeconomy has brought digital commercial paper, a fixed income asset administered by Guggenheim Treasury Services, to the XRP Ledger. It is fantastic to see yet another type of institutional financial asset being tokenized on the XRP Ledger. This next session, moderated by Sharia Malwa of CoinDesk, features Sam Bisri, the founder of Zeconomy, and Marcus Infanger, Senior Vice President of Ripple X, to
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to off-ramps, to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
Guest heads up Ripple's Impact Program, which is the foundation of Ripple's University Blockchain Research Initiative. The initiative has empowered blockchain research and development at the National University of Singapore, along with the University of Zurich, the University of Texas at Austin, and more. Joining the show now is Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Ripple, Eric Van Miltenberg. Hello, Eric. Yeah, great to have you here. I mean, you are the first person who's joined our programming that is from Ripple. So just talk to me about being here in Singapore for Apex 2025. What are you looking forward to?
Wow, it's fantastic to be in here in Singapore. It's always been a big hub for Ripple. I mean, APAC in general is such a trendsetter for the type of innovation that Ripple provides. We've had a presence here in the region for nearly 10 years now. And we've only grown in terms of our customers, our employee base, and I think the forward-looking perspective from the regulator here, MAS, has certainly been a contributor to allowing us to thrive and deliver the products that Ripple is delivering globally.
What is it that makes the region a trendsetter, do you think?
Well, I think it is a lot about leaning into new initiatives. I don't think it's unique to the blockchain technology. I think if you look back to the internet innovation and whatnot, this region's always kind of leaned in and thought about what the next thing is. So for us, it's about looking for partners that share our vision, that we can enable what we refer to as the Internet of Value, kind of modernizing the financial system to take advantage of this powerful new blockchain technology.
Now, we're talking about education here and research initiatives. Before we get into the specifics, just give me a broad overview about the kind of partnerships that you enter into with educational institutions.
Absolutely. Specifically, we have something called the University Blockchain Research Initiative, or UBRI. And this is a program that was founded a little over 7 years ago. And the whole idea here is that we want to help empower the next generation of leaders with the skill sets they need to embrace this new technology. So when we were putting the program together years ago, we wanted to seek out partners, and universities specifically, that already were kind of dipping their toe into this new technology. They weren't starting from sort of a standing start. And they just needed help to kind of get it to the next level. So we provided support in terms of funding, in terms of research, and expertise from our own employees, and really helping them to kind of move along their journey. We started with roughly 18 universities back in 2018 in a dozen countries around the world. Now we're up to 60 universities in 28 countries around the world. And we've deployed over $60 million right now in helping them to sort of go down that blockchain journey.
Let's talk a little bit about a specific use case. I know tomorrow on our programming, we're going to have one of the professors from the National University of Singapore.
Fantastic.
I know Ripple provided a grant to that university and of $1 million recently. Talk to me about support beyond the grant. What does that specific partnership look like?
Yeah, so beyond the grant, so there's everything from curriculum development making sure that from a pure education standpoint, there's materials and resources. There's support for hackathons, meetups. We fund fellowships, so post-grad students can get into some of the more detailed ways you can apply this technology in a real-world sense. So there's a real broad portfolio of ways we work together. And the nice thing is, I mean, this is a philanthropic effort.
Yeah.
So this isn't directed research. We're not dictating to universities what to do. But what we learned very early on is they want to engage in real-world problems, right? This isn't an ivory tower exercise. So obviously at Ripple, we have a ton of engineers, and it's not just engineering. It could be engineering, policy, legal, on the business side. The ability to work with smart folks at universities around the world who are just eager to dig into these problems and produce interesting ideas that we could leverage, and frankly, not just Ripple, that the blockchain community can leverage. It's really it's great to see and satisfying to know that this initiative is having real impact.
I'm sure you have a lot of stories, but is there one success story or one example of innovation that really sticks with you that's come out of the program?
Yeah, there is one. It's actually in the region. In South Korea, there's a university called Hanyang University, and a professor there started a program or project that turned to an initiative called ZK voting. And so, as the name would suggest, it's a voting application on the blockchain that leverages zero-knowledge proofs to ensure secure, reliable, transparent voting. Now, Korea's National Economic Council has adopted this solution. It's actually won a couple of awards for innovation globally. So this is, again, something that sort of was incubated and conceived within the university setting, and now is actually out in the wild. It's exactly the type of thing that sort of was the impetus for us even starting to think about this program years ago.
I know we've talked a little bit about some of the initiative's impact in APAC, but I want to go over to the United States now. I know that you recently donated $10 million to Teach for America to support U.S. classrooms and teachers. Talk to me about the premise for it. What were you thinking about internally at Ripple when you were making this decision to make this grant, and what kind of impact do you hope to make in the United States? Yeah,
so this is all part of the broader Ripple Impact initiative. It's a little discrete and separate from what I was just talking about, which is the University Blockchain Research Initiative. So we, I think at our core and Ripple's sort of culture and DNA, we're always looking for opportunities to give back, and I credit our founder and our leadership team for holding that value close. Education, we think especially is a foundation, not only for blockchain, for just the future. So when we were thinking about how we can do something impactful, we thought being able to provide tools to these organizations that are really there at ground zero, working to arm teachers with the supplies, the resources they need to help their students was key. And so we actually, this isn't the first time we did this. Back in 2017 or 18, we worked closely with another partner, Donors Choose, which also was part of this grant that we announced just a month or so ago. And Donors Choose is a great organization that helps teachers who usually have to dig into their own pockets to fund projects in the classroom. They kind of crowdsource that to let people donate. We had such a great experience there, we looked to double down. So partnering both with Donors Choose and Teach for America, we're just hoping to make sure that teachers, who are really at the core of helping make sure the future workforce and just the future populace they have the resources they need to do their jobs. And so for us, it is, again, a philanthropic effort, but we think it's really important to give back, especially in the communities that we operate, and the U.S. being our headquarters is important in that regard.
It makes me so happy to hear about these philanthropic efforts. At events like this, the conversation sometimes feels very much industry insiders. We're always talking about the industry, but to hear that Ripple's thinking outside of that and thinking about how to empower the youth, from students at a young age all the way up to universities, is really incredible to hear about. And the size of investment that's going into this philanthropic effort is not a small one.
No, it isn't. And again, a lot of credit to our executive chairman, our CEO. We take this seriously, and they're not shy, and they don't mind taking big swings. So I think this is very consistent with that philosophy. And we do get some side benefit from it. One, it's really important to our employees. I mean, I've talked to employees who, in their interview process at Ripple, cited the fact that they really respect the fact that we care, and we're more about just the bottom line. We're looking to see how we give back to the community. So it has sort of a broad-reaching impact, obviously for the recipients, but even for Ripple, it's a very positive thing.
All right, we got to wrap up in just a few minutes, but speaking of impact, folks are watching Apex 2025 from home. What do you hope people leave the conference who are here IRL thinking about, and what do you hope the folks who are watching at home leave this broadcast thinking about?
Well, I think we are seeing such great momentum in the space. And, I think for a long time, people associated blockchain and crypto just as something that's involved in like speculative get rich quick. But you walk around Apex here, we had this Ubri event yesterday, and you're seeing examples of real world utility. I mean, solutions that have applications well beyond just trying to, do a quick trade and earn some money that way. So I think the breadth of applications, the excitement amongst the folks here, and seeing the utility of the ledger, especially the XRP Ledger, which is the ledger that Ripple uses to facilitate a lot of its product and service delivery, is really exciting. And it gives you a lot of optimism that momentum is going to grow, and that we're moving into a next very productive phase of blockchain technology, and allowing the power of the blockchain really have real world impact.
I really love the fact that we can see beyond the hype now, and we are seeing real world use cases, solving real problems for real people. Experiencing the maturation of the space has been something really exciting for me. So thank you so much for joining me at the desk and telling us more about Ripple's research initiative.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Ripple, Eric Van Miltenberg.
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to off-ramps, to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are in Singapore, where Apex 2025 is underway. This is the largest annual summit for the XRPL community. Our next guest will be on stage later talking all about XRP staking powered by Flare and TEEs. It's our co-founder and CEO, Hugo Filion, joins us. Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Now, you're here at Apex 2025. You are going to be talking on stage later. Talk to me a little bit, give me a preview about what you hope to convey to the audience here.
Absolutely. So we're covering, the background of Flare is that it's a layer 1 blockchain which has fundamentally baked in data protocols into the chain. So this allows effectively the chain itself to get data from prices to Web 2 data to Web 3 data. This means you can build applications on the chain that are quite unique relative to other layer 1s. We've built essentially the easiest and most robust way to bring data from external systems onto the chain. We're using that to increase the capabilities of the XRP asset and for people to be able to use that XRP asset to get yield through a restaking and staking service.
Talk to me about bringing data, off-chain data on-chain. What are some of the pain points that you're solving? What are some of the challenges that this helps solve for folks that are building, and then also the folks who are using the product?
Fundamentally, you have two major challenges. First is safety. So safety is essentially, blockchains are not data, like, on the whole, not data native. Flare is. And how you secure the data coming onto the chain is quite important because a bad piece of data or a bad data print can affect downstream value through applications very, very strongly. So you have to have, as safe and as decentralized a system as possible, in our view. And that's what we've built Flare for. And then the second is ease of use. If you go to an Oracle and you try to get a piece of data, it can be very, very hard to acquire that data and to get a set of validators or nodes that will give you that data. On Flare, especially for Web 2 data, we've built a very generic system to be able to effectively get data from pretty much any open API that you wish to use. So safety and effectively usability for developers, and that's critical. Those are very strong pain points.
I got to ask you about AI because everyone loves to talk about AI now. I think when we talk about data, there is a real AI play here. How are you thinking about integrating AI into what you're doing? And does that help you kind of solve those problems faster and make this data a little bit more transparent?
So I think there's a large nexus between the data that we can provide and machine learning AI. It remains to be seen how people want to develop that out in crypto, in blockchain. A lot of the AI projects we've been seeing are, maybe first gen and need a lot of improvement. The way we think about AI, we're a blockchain that provides data, but blockchains really suck at compute. They don't have large amounts of compute power. And so we're building an off-chain verified compute layer that complements the blockchain, gives you a large amount of guarantees over the code that is running in that layer. And that's where I think there'll be a real expression of AI together with Flare's data.
Now, let's talk a little bit about XRP staking. I know that you are going to be discussing that on stage a little bit later. Talk to us more about this partnership and what this means for folks who are holding XRP.
Oh, absolutely. So we're building with an entity in the US called Firelight. We're building a staking platform for XRP. And it's going to start with things like staking to AVSs. An AVS is actively validated service. This is a service either on-chain or on a different chain or a layer 2 that needs to acquire value in order to bootstrap its ecosystem, acquire security value. That's the fundamental premise of effectively staking in this manner. But we're also going to be providing different types of vaults. So, you have a risk strata, starting with very, very, very low risk things like staking to AVSs, but there'll be other vaults with different risk levels that do more interesting financial, activities with XRP. And so people will be able to pick effectively the level of risk that they want, obviously compliant with regulation. So, from very simple low risk things to higher risk, higher return things. And that's the sort of promise that staking represents for XRP, which is, of course, a $134 billion asset and a huge use case, for Flare, and a huge use case for being able to put XRP to work in other areas.
You said obviously compliant with regulation. So far at the desk, we've spoken about regulatory regimes all over the world. We've talked about MAS here in Singapore. We've talked about the US. We've talked about MiCA over in Europe. How do you ensure that that compliance is up to par with all the different regulatory frameworks in the jurisdictions that you operate in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm fundamentally an infrastructure builder, and so I don't really build applications. The things that we build are sort of not. We don't have to think necessarily about compliance because it's very core infra. For our partners that build applications that people are going to directly use, that's their sort of bread and butter. And you just have to. I think you have to pick the hardest regulatory regime that you want to attack, and be compliant in that area, and then hopefully that gives you compliance across the spectrum.
All right, we are at Apex 2025 in Singapore. What are you hoping to walk away from the event with, and what are you hoping to walk away from the region with as you go back home and continue to build?
Absolutely. So, I hope the XRP community and the people at Ripple will understand, what we're building with Flare and Firelight. It's obviously the first major use case for our blockchain for data. We obviously intend to go way beyond, just XRP staking. There's huge value in using data and compute to increase the capabilities of DeFi applications. We think we have probably a list of 30 things we would like to have built. So if you're a developer out there, come and talk to us. That utilize the very unique nature of Flare's stack, from AI to way more interesting financial primitives than currently exist. So that's sort of where we are. So I'm hoping that the audience here will understand how they're going to be able to use their XRP to get yield and then participate downstream in the DeFi ecosystem with a liquid stake token. This then allows them to effectively retain their position in XRP, but also get some financial performance out of it other than just the beta to the market.
You mentioned a little bit about what you're thinking about next, wanting to go beyond XRP staking. What is that next step? Can you give us a little bit of alpha?
Absolutely. So we obviously have XRP staking, we have a DeFi ecosystem, but we're building out a verifiable compute layer. I think that once you have a compute layer, you can start looking at, okay, well, how do I put things like risk models into a compute layer? Once I have a verifiable risk model that can't effectively be changed arbitrarily, because this is the guarantee that blockchain gives you, is that, this is the guarantee you want to replicate from what blockchain gives you with a verifiable compute layer, which is that the code is the code and it doesn't, it's fairly immutable. What you retail.
Hugo, thank you so much for joining us at the desk. I look forward to seeing you around the event.
Thank you, my pleasure.
That was Flare co-founder and CEO Hugo Filion. All right, we are going to head back over to the XRPL stage and take a listen in.
Million in net profit last year, but they recently went public, and clearly the market has huge appetite when it comes to stablecoins. And I think clearly the public market is finally now waking up to how powerful and how disruptive stablecoins and kind of the underlying technology of blockchains are, like how valuable they are. And so those are the three big, clear categories that we've been actively investing throughout the history of the fund. But I think kind of evolving beyond that, fundamentally, blockchains, they're ledgers, right? We've seen the dominant use case and the winning use case has been trading, and that's why exchanges, layer ones, and stablecoins have been the winning categories. But there's also no reason why it wouldn't be able to power different use cases. And so at the edge, there's other categories like DePIN and other use cases that haven't really fully proven themselves like as a mature category, but we're actively investing in as early stage and venture investors.
Thanks for that. That was a nice view of the stuff you're looking at right now. But here's a question, right? You obviously get a lot of inbound requests from founders asking for capital to invest in their companies. What's a few key advices that you give these people to succeed? Because there's a lot of founders in crypto and very few companies that really make it beyond 2 years. What's some advices that you give them out to them?
Yeah, I think right now is perhaps the best time to start a crypto company. And the reason I say that is because, one, there hasn't been a better time when it comes to regulatory clarity and how healthy the overall environment is today, right? Like if you ask a crypto founder, especially if you're US based 3 years ago, most of those guys came to Singapore because it was just impossible to build a DeFi protocol or build anything that's substantial in crypto 3 years ago with the previous administration. But now we're clearly in a much better environment. Now when it comes to more concrete perhaps suggestions, I would say one thing that recently has become, I think, very clear to me is if we were to look back in the history of crypto, particularly around 2017, 2018, the early ICO days to 24, to let's say the DeFi mania 2021, the NFT mania, and then 24, 25, let's call it the meme coin and mania, and perhaps the stablecoin, the excitement around stablecoins. I think what's clearly defining to me is previously the market has rewarded a lot of rewarded projects or founders on raw ideas, in the sense that as long as you had really good ideas and it's innovative, it's new, it's something that people haven't heard about or haven't seen, then the market would more or less likely you're going to be rewarded by the market. But I think that's getting really competitive right now. And so again, if you look at the example of Hyperliquid, which has been one of the leading examples, it's clearly, I think we're clearly shifting towards a regime where not only do you need your product and your story to be innovative, to be new, but also you need very strong and clear product market fit, right? And so in the Hyperliquid example, the reason there's so much excitement really comes down to the fact that it's an exchange. It's simple to understand. It makes several $100 million of revenue a year. Over 90% of that is used to buy back the token and burned under the assistance fund. And so there's a clear and easy to understand story for investors, for traders, for everybody in the ecosystem. And so I do think if you want to win in this market in the next 3 to 4 years, build for product market fit, right? Build a product that people want to use, show revenue, and think about how that revenue would translate into growing your ecosystem potentially via all of these mechanisms. And so yeah, that would perhaps be the biggest shift, I would say, in the overall market 3 years ago, if someone were to start a crypto startup compared to today.
Yeah. There you go. Keep that in mind if you're planning to apply to Dragonfly Capital for funding. You said the 3 best businesses are exchanges, blockchains, and stablecoins, right? So who are some people or folks who are really nailing 2 out of 3 of these aspects? I know Jeff at Hyperliquid is one guy who's really, but that's more on the deck side. Is there any other people who you really sort of look up to in terms of the products that they've built out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's exchanges, stablecoins, and layer ones. In some sense, they have a very strong synergy, right? And we've seen leaders or winners from each category move to the other categories, in the past couple of years, right? So centralized exchanges, the Binance, OKX, BitGet, Bybit, all of them, have their own chain, either an L1 or an L2 in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of them have tried to launch their own stablecoins as well, to different degrees of success. And then we've also seen winning kind of blockchains really win by kind of the leading or the dominant exchanges that's on their chain, right? Even if you to look at a general purpose platform of, let's say, Ethereum, there's Uniswap, Solana, there's Meteora, and all of the on-chain dexes. And same thing goes for stablecoins as well. I think the space is getting clearly very competitive in that. Again, if you look at the kind of first movers, Tether and Circle, all of the revenue they're making, they're not giving it back to the end users, right? And so the 13 bill of net profit Tether took away, or took home, was essentially over the kind of interest income, right? And so that was not transferred to the users. But we're seeing new startups, thinking about ways to give that yield or give that interest back to the users as a way of new way of acquiring users. And so, yeah, and we've seen also leaders such as Athena, which has been a shining example in terms of DeFi and stablecoins on Ethereum in the past couple of years, launching Converge and launching their own exchange and their own chain as well, to tap into kind of the broader exchange market. So yeah, my view for those three categories is it's going to, the theme really is convergence, that everything is going to converge. And I think it really just comes down to who is going to win as a product, and can you win over traders and win over users. And so it's going to be a very exciting time to see all of the existing players converge to a very similar form of product.
Recognize, if you follow CoinDesk Live's programming, EZA co-founders Dom and Phil Kwok. Hello.
Hello, thanks very much for having us on.
Of course, thanks for being here. I feel like we've traveled around the world together.
Yeah. Hong Kong, Toronto.
Now we're here.
All that as well in Austin.
Yeah, and now we're here in Singapore.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about what you're doing here in Singapore. There is a lot of new development going on at EZA, but let's start at the hackathon, because I teased that out at the beginning of the show. You had 2 days here, more than 200 developers came over to Singapore. Talk to me about what went down and who came out reigning winners.
We actually had almost 300.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we had over 690 applicants actually apply to come to the hackathon. We whittled it down about half, so pretty brutal acceptance rate. And they built just some absolutely incredible projects. I mean, Dom will touch on a little bit about why those are so important for the XRP Ledger. But for me, my personal favorites was a Kickstarter for projects, which allowed you to get liquidity on the projects from day one. So you didn't have to wait a year until the project was out before you could actually trade it. And then the second one as well, lending protocols and a lot of remittances as well, so payments applications.
Our conversations here at the desk have kind of been dominated by remittances and lending. And so, Dom, tell me a little bit more about the projects that came out on top and what stood out for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had so many cool projects. I think the main thing for us is that, seeing all of this development happen on the XRP Ledger is super important, not only for us, for the XRP Ledger in general, but also for everyone, watching this online, because ultimately, these blockchains thrive on the apps that are actually built on them. So the more apps that are built on them, the more value that actually accrues to the underlying blockchain, which is the XRP Ledger. And so that's why we're trying to really drive that huge wave of developers to come onto the blockchain and actually launch their projects. You can think of it very similar to an app store, right? The app store that has the most apps wins, which is why iOS became so popular. And so that's really what we're doing with the blockchains, and so many cool projects actually. One that came out of our Hong Kong hackathon that was built on the XRP Ledger called Zeno Finance. They are now actually speaking at Apex. So they've come a super long way from just an idea, launching a project, to actually pitching at Apex, which is super cool.
How does that make you feel as the people who kind of help them incubate their ideas, to see that kind of progression as you travel around the world and do these hackathons and give more people the opportunity to bring their ideas to life?
I mean, it's amazing. We're literally at the forefront of innovation in the Web3 crypto space. So pretty much all the best builders who come into the space come through EZA. And ultimately then, when they continue to build, that actually transforms the industry completely. We've had projects that have come through, raised multi-millions, been valued at billions, Cognition AI, many others that have completely revolutionized both crypto and also other fields. So that's always a really cool thing to see. And ultimately, it drives huge value to the blockchains we work with.
We're talking about apps and real use cases building on top of blockchains. What advice would you give developers, would you give folks who are coming out to the hackathons on choosing the right blockchain and the right ecosystem for their project?
Ooh, well, we're at XRP Ledger Apex.
I
think
know.
there's only one thing we can say, the XRP Ledger. I think that the XRP Ledger itself, the reason that we decided to partner together with Ripple and host this hackathon is because the XRP Ledger is really primed for this adoption right now. You have this incredible community of users who actually, to Dom's point, there's not a ton of apps that have already been built on the XRP Ledger yet. So that makes it an amazing opportunity for developers to be the first to tap into this audience. And also you've got all these different institutional players. I think at this conference, we've already had a couple of announcements about the different real-world assets which are being issued on the Ledger, the tokenization efforts as well. And we've been catching up with David Schwartz, CTO of Ripple, over the years, and just the growth of where this is heading is so exciting. So I think that this ecosystem is definitely one of the best for developers to build in.
So it's really looking at users, looking at the types of partnerships, looking at room for growth within the ecosystem is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Yeah, and looking at the community as well. I think, ultimately blockchains, tokens, they're all centered around communities. That's really, what unites all of them. And the blockchains with the biggest communities ultimately tend to be the ones that perform the best and also win long term. We were just at XRP Las Vegas with the community out there. And yeah, the XRP army is like no other. So you need people to use the apps, right? They get built on the blockchains. And the bigger your community, the more users you have and the more value that ultimately accrues to the underlying blockchain.
The XRP army really is like no other. They really are like no other. Now, we were talking just briefly before we started the interview about some exciting news that EZA has coming up. You have a white paper that is being published in weeks from now. Give me a little bit of a preview into the white paper and what this means for you as you move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we've been heads down building. And straight after this, I think we're going to put an end on the conferences for a little bit to just go absolutely heads down on the white paper. A couple of the research team as well are out here, so they'll be speaking up on stage tomorrow. This is the culmination of really this years-long journey that we've had in Web3, which is to accelerate the adoption of the world's leading networks like the XRP Ledger. The white paper is what's going to help us bring that to the next level. So far, we've already brought over 1 million developers into Web3. This is what's going to help us reach that billion number, right? Get 1 billion people actually into these amazing networks that have been created over the years. We first got started in the space in 2013 through Bitcoin mining. It was a very, very different world back then. We've already had so much adoption since then, but really we're still just at the tip of the iceberg. The EZA white paper is going to make it a lot easier for developers to build, a lot easier for them to come in, and also ultimately then accelerate all this adoption like we were just talking about with the applications, bringing more apps ultimately to the App Store.
Now, you said that the white paper is going to make it easier for builders to build. Talk to me a little bit more about that. What are we going to read in the white paper? What comes after the white paper? What is it that you're actually building for builders?
Great question. So essentially what we're doing is right now we are working on the intense scientific basis, so all the technology. And that, what it means is it's bringing together this whole ecosystem that we've built. So on one hand, bringing together lots of different primitives that we've seen developers just need time and time again. The fact is that you can build about 70% of all the applications in Web3 with about just a handful of primitives. We're bringing all those together, creating an ecosystem that developers can just tap into, whether they're a Web2 developer already in Web3. And then what happens after this is once the white paper's out, we're going through to peer review, and then we're actually going to start implementing it, engineering it.
Well, I look forward to seeing all of the excitement around it. I look forward to seeing what your peers have to say about what you're building, and I look forward to it coming to fruition.
Thank you. Going to be great.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to see you both again. I look forward to the next country that we meet in.
Definitely.
I wonder
Looking
where
forward
it will
to it.
be.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for having us on.
All right, that was EZA co-founders Dom and Phil Kwok. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to off-ramps, to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
CoinDesk live from Apex 2025 in Singapore. The event is, of course, hosted by Ripple. I'm Jen Sanasi, and I'm joined at the desk now by the president of XRPL Commons, David Sherry. Hello. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for having me. Of course, thank you for being here. Now, in the last interview I did, I was talking to Dom and Phil Kwok about the incredible community that has gathered around XRP, XRP Ledger, Ripple. Talk to me about fostering this community.
So this community is at the core of what we do. We're a non-profit based in Paris, XRPL Commons. We've been around for 2 years. and we're helping to elevate the builders in the community. So the developers, the entrepreneurs, the researchers, and this community is really the crossroad of all this world. If you add to that the holders, the corporations, it's a very interesting mix. And so we've been able to witness the growth of this community in the last few years, where a lot of people are getting interested either from the token side or from the features of the ledger or from the depth of the ledger, the number of users. Some people are attracted by this pool of opportunities for them. We see young developers, we see more established developers come to the XRPL. People from the fintech space are usually, they have this image of the XRP Ledger being more of a corporate chain. So they approach it with this intent of, okay, how can I integrate the XRP Ledger in my products? What can I do with it? What's the added value for us to go with it? And so there's not like one kind of developer or builders on XRP Ledger. There are many kinds.
Well, we've talked to a lot of different folks who are interacting with XRP Ledger in many different ways. And so I think we've seen the many kinds, the many varieties of folks who are in the XRPL community, even just here at this desk today.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting to see, and it evolves. Like maybe, when it started, it was probably with a pure intention of addressing payments. And as the protocol evolved, it attracted more and more builders. So I would say right now there's a momentum for many reasons. But the global context, the political context, the stability of the ledger, it calls out for more people to build on it.
Talk to me about fostering this community. So community is really a foundational piece for a lot of projects in this industry. And I think where I've seen communities kind of come and go is like projects have this big community and then they don't really engage them to the extent that they stick around. And it seems like there's a real differentiator there with the community around XRPL. How do you foster the community? How do you keep them engaged?
So fostering the community, it's our #1 mission. So we do it a bit with a sandwich approach. There's a bottom-up approach where we have already like 6 million activated wallets. So in a very organic way, we have attracted a lot of users. Potential users for builders. So I'm building an app. There's already 6 million potential users for these builders, and also from a more top-down approach, working with public institutions, larger corporations, and also with this organic approach. So we have been doing that for 2 years with 5 different pillars, and so we have different ways to address them. One pillar is really corporate. How do you engage with corporates? Is very different from how you engage with startups, of course. So corporations, what they want to understand is where does blockchain create value in their whole value chain? And it's different for each industry. So XRP Ledger is known for payments, but it can also address traceability. Creating any kind of proof on a ledger helps you remove conflict of interest. So corporations are really interested in that aspect. Ripple works more with financial and banking industrials, where they come to the ledger for its capacity to tokenize real-world assets, to exchange with one another. And startups will come for the ease of using the XRP Ledger. So we really leverage different aspects of the community. Then the developers, the young and the more established developers, we also work with them through a range of programs. So we have been very active with the universities, piggybacking on a research program that Ripple funds. We have our own academic program where we help teachers teach blockchain. A lot of them, they're interested, but it takes time to develop curriculum, so we provide a lot of material, open source, for teachers from any blockchain, by the way. It doesn't have to be XRPL specific, but we had a slice of XRPL content to that. And then student clubs, student blockchain clubs, where a lot of them are active. The universities and the schools, they don't realize the potential there is in terms of careers. There's clearly a lack of developers in our ecosystem, in the Web3 space in general. And so there are ups and downs for sure, but at the moment there is a lack of developers. So there are a lot of career opportunities for developers. That's what's convincing for university. They want to find jobs for the future, for the students that will graduate, for the future graduates. So our role is really boots on the ground. We foster the community by organizing a lot of events, small gathering, but also very large events. Contributing to XRPL Apex is one of our pride. Like it's the big gathering. We cannot miss it anywhere in the world. This year here in Singapore is so interesting to get closer to the Asian and Pacific region where a lot is happening. Korea, Japan are huge market in terms of holders, users. There are a lot of traction in these countries. And also different cultures, different issues. You know, what we're trying to do and promote with XRP Ledger is that you can solve hard issues. We have an incubator in Paris where we invite people from all around the globe to work on projects for 3 months. And we see people coming from LATAM with a very specific type of issues they want to tackle, you know, currency that they cannot rely on. We have people from Africa coming with very specific issues they want to tackle, like payment system being insufficient, or financial infrastructure being failing. And so that's interesting for us to see, because I'm based in Paris, I'm French, I have a very French background, let's say. And so the kind of issue we can meet in France are different from their issues. So everyone comes with their background, vision, and will to solve issues that are different, and they can all be solved or partly solved with blockchain. And
we got to wrap in just a second, but you mentioned the excitement in the Asia-Pacific region. When you think about this region that we're sitting in right now, what's one of the most exciting innovations that's happening on the XRP Ledger for you?
So there are a few projects that are coming out of this region. There's Agent that run that is a terminal, an AI terminal for people to interact with blockchain, coming from the community, very organic. There are a number of marketplaces that are coming for instance, meme coins. First Ledger is one of the projects that is partly based here. There are a number of projects that we see coming from here. The passion is real. What I can see is the passion is real. The users are more educated and advanced in the field of Web3 in general here, because it's part of the culture. So yeah, I'm very excited to do more in Asia Pacific in the next years.
Well, I'm excited to hear more of the conversations that are had on stage here at Apex 2025 and to learn more about how XRPL is developing their community, not only here, but all around the world. So David, thank you for joining me at the desk.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
That was the president of XRPL Commons, David Bashiri. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
For over a decade, Ripple has worked to bridge the gap between blockchain and traditional finance. We've built enterprise-grade digital asset infrastructure, trusted by the world's largest banks. From instant global payouts and access to off-ramps, to secure digital asset custody solutions, to the stablecoin created with trust and compliance at its core. Ripple enables enterprises around the world to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. We're not waiting for the future of finance to arrive. We're building the Internet of Value today.
Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from Apex 2025 in Singapore, hosted by Ripple. Joining me at the desk right now to take a look at a different piece of the XRPL ecosystem is Ripple X SVP Marcus Infanger. Hello.
Hey, John. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, it's good for you to be here, for you to be at the desk with me. We're here at Apex 2025 in Singapore. Talk to me about what you want people to walk away from this event with.
Yeah, so look, I want to see people walking away from this event with a recognition that this is happening. Blockchain technology is starting to really insert itself into real-world financial use cases, and it's happening on blockchains like the XRP Ledger. And so we've announced earlier on a partnership with Seconomy and their partner Guggenheim Treasury Services, which is one of the largest issuer of commercial paper in the traditional financial world. And so they've announced basically that they're going to be issuing a digital commercial paper on the XRP Ledger. And so we're exploring together in this partnership how we can utilize this highly regulated financial assets and insert it in things like payments use cases using the Ripple payments product and really deliver real world financial efficiencies into the system. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm personally very excited about, why I joined this industry. So I want to people walk away with this recognition.
Well, talk to me a little bit about this economy news, because that is very big news. It's happening on the XRP Ledger. You know, I imagine that you have been building and thinking about this for a very long time, and there have been roadblocks along the way. And to be here talking about this economy news, talking about this real convergence of TradFi and crypto, just talk to me about what that feels like for you.
Yeah, so appreciate the question, and you're spot on. I think we're really, zooming out. First of all, we're at an inflection point whereby this technology is sort of like moving beyond the hype into real-world financial utility. And by the way, that's been, Ripple's sort of like DNA since day one. We always wanted to deliver solutions today using crypto and blockchain technology in the real financial world, as opposed to in a parallel sort of like economy. And so I think, the fact that larger financial institutions are now looking at this technology as a real solution in production rather than something to tick an innovation box or basically, not considering it at all, that's super exciting. And so why are we seeing this happening on the XRP Ledger? So I'd say there's a couple of elements. Number one, the technology itself is really serving itself naturally as a solution as financial institutions look to issue these assets safely. In terms of how it's designed from the ground up. It's a very efficient blockchain in terms of cost and speed. It's been battle tested over 12 years, more than 3.3 billion transactions without any security incidents. And it has financial primitives baked into the protocol, like native tokenization since day one, 2012, native decentralized exchange, and additional compliance features like, for example, authorized trust lines, which we've been exploring to leverage for this integration. So when you have an asset that's highly regulated and that's rated P1 by Moody's, you want to make sure it's available for qualified purchases in the first place. And so this function helps to ensure that. And so that's kind of like why we're seeing this now, because there were some. There's securities laws, there's regulations, and at the same time, there's also just kind of like a general stream of adoption that needs to be right for this convergence, so to speak, to unfold. And that's what's happening now.
At the desk today, we've talked a lot about stablecoins, but we've not yet talked about RLUSD. Talk to me about where that fits into the greater stablecoin picture.
Yeah, totally. So again, I'll start a little bit on the zoom out front and then hone in. And so basically, if you look at large, it's fair to say stablecoins are really the sort of like asset we value in our sort of like traditional financial world. That's starting to show real product market fit within crypto in terms of like being, an asset used within crypto to remove volatility. But also being increasingly integrated into things like cross-border payment in the real world, which is obviously what Ripple has been about for many, many years. And we've been using stablecoins before RLUSD as well in terms of like facilitating cross-border payments more efficiently. And so it's been, very much as sort of like a result of the demand on the one hand we've been seeing from customers that there is, product market fit for a compliance-first, highly, transparent and compliant stablecoin. And this market is set to grow, right? I think numbers are, 2.8 trillion within the next couple of years. And so we believe this is a space where, a rising tide can lift many, many boats, and there's not like a winner-take-all situation. And separately, we really feel that we're uniquely positioned to use an asset like this in things like cross-border payment and the product we're servicing there, but also in, for example, through the acquisition of Hidden Row, the prime broker that's bridging sort of like traditional assets and digital assets and using it as a sort of like, form of collateral there. And then if you look at the whole real-world asset financialization, financial tokenization space, you can see they each settle against something. And so we believe RLUSD is really a pole position to serve in many different sort of like institutional grade financial use cases. I'm pretty excited about it, seeing the traction since the beginning of the year and so forth.
We spoke to the CEO of Hidden Road at the desk earlier today. Obviously, congratulated him on the Ripple acquisition, $1.25 billion. Talk to me about what went into that. Why is Hidden Road such an integral piece to what Ripple's vision is for the future?
So that's a great question, by the way. So if you recall, I don't know, a couple of years back, you were thinking of Ripple and payments, Ripple cross-border payments. That's it, pretty much end of story. And obviously the XRPL has always been part of that and helping to enable that way before real-world utility became a bigger theme in this industry. And so if you think about how this story has evolved, obviously now we're operating bank-rate custody platform, stablecoin, payments continues to be the flagship product. Our competence and engagement around the XRP Ledger layer 1 blockchains, really purpose-built to support real-world financial use case, and then Hidden Road. And when you look at the whole puzzle together, you can see how Ripple's evolved really more into sort of like a end-to-end, one-stop shop digital asset infrastructure provider to financial services, helping to really close the gap between the promise of decentralized financial market infrastructure and traditional financial markets, coupled with also, the deep relationships we've been fostering over the years with capital markets and financial markets. And so you can see how this really fits in well there if you think about this notion of, being an end-to-end solution provider between traditional financial markets and digital asset infrastructure. So that's why this acquisition is making a ton of sense.
Well, if you look at XRP Ledger, if you look at RLUSD, just to tie our conversation up here, what's the future that you imagine? Is it a world where many chains and many stablecoins can coexist and be collaborative, or is it one where you believe we're going to see consolidation and a few will left standing for the various different use cases that they have built a consumer base on?
Yeah, so we firmly believe this movement is multi-chain and it's harnessing benefits around decentralization. Is decentralization like, the be-all, end-all for everything? I'm not sure, right? Like what we're really focused on is how can we solve problems using this decentralized financial market infrastructure? And so I don't think it's a winner-take-all market at all. And I think the direction of travel is clearly one of sort of like cooperation and working with the old traditional financial market system, but then multiple networks as well, and making sure there's seamless interoperability at institutional sort of like grade scale. And we collectively as an industry built this sort of like, internet of value where money can move as freely, as seamlessly as information moves through the internet. And if we don't want to recreate the same issues we had around fragmentation in the old system, we got to collaborate together to enable seamless instant movement across different networks and backward integration with, legacy networks as well. So that's my take.
I think that's a great take to wrap the show off. Wrap the show with today, Marcus. Thanks so much for joining me at the desk.
Thank you for having me.
That was RippleX Senior Vice President Marcus Infanger. All right, that is a wrap for me today. I am Jen Sanasi. I'm going to be back at the desk tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Singapore time, bringing you the best from Apex 2025. We are going to head out now and take a look at what's being talked about on the XRP Ledger stage. We will see you tomorrow.
Houses in the industry. I think if you guys were celebs, there's an interesting play that you could have here, maybe Brannica or Moneybrad. I don't know whichever ones that work for you.
Oh, that's a new one. I haven't heard that. That's good.
No, yeah.
I don't think it's going to catch on either.
Yeah, probably not.
But okay, so you've both been at Ripple now for a little while, over a decade, and Monica, just very briefly, what made you join Ripple all those years ago in 2013?
So it was one of the co-founders, Chris Larson, who's our esteemed executive chairman of our board. Chris, I'd known Chris from his prior life as founder CEO of Prosper. Chris is a serial fintech entrepreneur. He founded eLoan in the 90s and then Prosper in the early noughts, and then Ripple. And he is one of those people, I think you can attest, like he's a real visionary. He sees in decades far out timelines of where the world is headed. I just remember at that time, I was catching up with him in the summer of 2013, And he was just so excited. He was like on fire about the digital gold revolution with Bitcoin, and so excited about XRP Ledger being this whole new payment system for the world. And that was what he was talking about, Internet of Value, things that the whole industry has talked about now, but he was talking about that way back then. So it was really, he inspired me to join.
Fantastic. And for you, 2 years, a few years afterwards, you joined?
Yeah, I joined because Monica was there.
Not true.
Exactly. Look, it's kind of a funny story. I had been introduced to Bitcoin in 2012, and I invested a little bit in Bitcoin, but I always had this, and this is not an anti-Bitcoin statement. I'm pro-Bitcoin. I'm nervous every time I say anything that people are going to be like, oh, Brad's anti-Bitcoin. I'm not. But I remember thinking like that maybe the Achilles heel to Bitcoin might end up being this very anti-bank, anti-government. And I still to this day kind of, like, we're not going to have a completely separate parallel system. There's going to be lots of bridges between traditional finance and what we now call decentralized finance. And when I was recruited, and I got a recruiting call about Ripple, and I remember the recruiter called and he's like, have you heard of Ripple? I lied, and I said yes. And I was like, but remind me what they do. And actually, I mean, and Monica may remember this, he was describing a payments company, and I said, look, I'm not a payments guy. You should, I gave them names of people I knew at PayPal and Visa, and trying to like push it off to somebody else. And the recruiter kind of made fun of me because I wasn't working at the time. And he's like, what else are you doing? Like, just come in and meet with Chris. And I agree with Monica. I mean, Chris is one of these guys who just sees around corners. And like, we all have our own superpowers. And I think one of the things that has worked so well is the partnership between Chris and me and Monica. And that Chris sees around corners and we figure out, like, okay, how do we get there? And his vision has been incredibly consistent around this Internet of Value. And I think we still underestimate how significant a shift in how the world works that can and will be. And I think it's going to create a lot of tailwinds for the industry and for Ripple and for XRP.
I have 2 fun stories to add about that time. You did have a job.
I was an Uber driver.
You were an Uber driver.
That's true.
He was testing some markets with his other friends, potentially
bored.
And exploring entrepreneurial opportunities. I remember that distinctly. And then 2, Ashish Birla, who was our head of product for a very long time, GM of RippleNet, but he and I both were really excited to meet Brad and hopeful that he would come on board to Ripple. His fame from Yahoo was the Peanut Butter Manifesto. This concept of like, you know, Yahoo lost its edge through lack of focus, and Ashish and I were feeling that of XRP Ledger was this magnificent invention, and it was like a hammer looking for a nail. And so we really needed someone, a leader, to kind of drive focus within the business and like, you know, focus until we could, you know, build product market fit.
And here we are.
I was going to say, this is fascinating. It really is. I
don't think you knew when you asked that question, you probably didn't expect
We're going to take up the whole time.
No, it was a gamble. But yeah, I think a lot of people here have got a little bit more insight about you, and they're going to get more as we go along. So but we're going to play a little quick fire round to keep the momentum up, I think. So it's a game of underrated, overrated. And so it's where I'll put a phrase or a word and the simple answer of whether you think it's underrated or overrated. So we'll start off with a few easy ones. Lawyers working in crypto. Okay, Brad.
Well, you didn't say Stu Alderodi is underrated. Lawyers in crypto maybe at large, I think mostly underrated. Like they're not that all lawyers in crypto are wonderful, and certainly I've had encounters. I mean, the other side of the SEC case, those are lawyers at the SEC making arguments that you think are complete. You know, I don't think they were good actors. And as the judge said, they were not following a faithful allegiance to the law. So those lawyers, I think, are overrated.
Okay, okay. So I was kind of going in a different direction with this. As a child, you wanted to be a lawyer. You can dig into this a little bit as well.
So when I was a kid, this is, maybe I'm 10 or 12 years old. Like, you don't know anything. But my grandfather was a lawyer in the telecom industry, and I was enamored with what I saw of his professional career, and I thought, I want to be a lawyer. Now, Monica thinks it's just because I like to argue.
Yeah, he does.
But yeah, that was my original, that's what I thought. But as you go through that journey, I don't know, what we want to do when we're a kid versus what we end up doing, there's a gap.
There tends to be, yeah. So I tend to ask this a lot, but I think the next one was for you, actually. Orthopedic surgeons working in crypto.
So this Pat's also calling too. He'd asked us like, yeah, what had we wanted to be when we grew up? I was in, I don't know, elementary school and decided on being an orthopedic surgeon. It's not a great story. It's just that, being a doctor, I wanted to help people, but I knew that orthopedic surgery would be very difficult. I am someone, I think, a pattern. I like big challenges.
So you chose crypto.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's no link whatsoever. But at least on yours, Brad, there is a little bit of a linkage there. And, the skills of argumentative seem to come across.
I didn't say I'm argumentative.
I said it.
I'm going to ask your team for the course of the day.
They're paid to answer that correctly.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to switch gears now. Meme coins, underrated, overrated?
We might not agree on this one. I would say underrated in so much as if you take it for face value, there are a lot of meme coins that are outright scams. I see that. In other cases, some have kind of miraculously become real functioning markets around these meme coins. The thing that I think is really powerful, you take some of these blockchain ecosystems, meme coins really drove a lot of the ecosystem build out. By that I mean wallet infrastructure and users and capital and new developers and that kind of thing. So I think that there's lasting impact from meme coins. And if you go back to 2016, 2017, the ICO boom was the same for Ethereum.
Okay.
I mean, Monica's right. We're a little bit on the other side of this one. I think meme coins are generally, and maybe grossly overrated because I see them as just not sustainable. I think one of the things that Ripple has done well, and I think many in the XRP community have done well, is think about it in long arcs of time. And I mean, look, are people going to make money or lose money in these short spikes in the meme coin industry? Sure. And I will also say I have been wrong on occasion about meme coins. For people who have followed some of my public statements, I used to really speak not so kindly towards Dogecoin. And I was just like, Dogecoin? It literally was created as a lark, right? I mean, it wasn't serious. I mean, it is literally a pile of shit as the logo. These are facts.
You got to call a spade
I'm not making anything up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I felt like it doesn't I felt, past tense, that it didn't reflect well on our industry. If we're trying to engage institutions and build those bridges between traditional finance and decentralized finance, Dogecoin isn't representing us well. And at the time, I mean, some of the early inflation of Doge coins was outrageous and blah, blah, blah. But where I agree with Monica, and I think I got wrong, is Elon Musk willed Dogecoin into so much liquidity that it's not going away.
No.
And okay, it's part of the ecosystem. It plays a role. But I think a lot of the meme coins, it's just people trying to do these get-rich-quick rug pulls.
Yeah.
And it reflects badly on those of us in the industry trying to build real products for real customers that leverage these technologies. And then frustratingly, and I'll use a US example, you have a elected leader like Elizabeth Warren who doesn't focus on the good work that lots of people in this room and certainly at Ripple are doing, and focuses on these negative use cases. And so I'm going with overrated.
Got you. Yeah, no, certainly there is a line, and I think in some ways it goes against the grain of why this all come around in the first place. Okay, then one question I was kind of asked by your teams to ask is around what's the one crypto meme that perfectly captures the chaos or brilliance of the industry? And you've kind of...
Doge.
One. Yeah, okay.
I mean, for sure, Doge. I mean, it is both the chaos and the brilliance.
Yep.
And, you know, look, in effect, Elon Musk, although he doesn't, to my knowledge, have an economic alignment with Doge, he spoke Doge into leadership and liquidity. And, you know, to some degree, liquidity begets liquidity. And as I said, like, I don't think Doge is going away. And, you know, others have obviously tried to replicate that in creating their own meme coins of many flavors. It's hard to, you know, part of that also is timing. You're early in the market. There weren't as many meme coins, if you will, where now you have an explosion that I just like, I don't really get it. But I've never purchased a meme coin.
Okay.
Ever.
Maybe today's the day.
And Monica, do you have...
If I did buy one, I'd buy the all the money XRP meme coin.
There you go.
Wow.
Well, now you have to.
Now I have to.
Okay, so you have a homework assignment. Sorry. Oh, the meme.
Yes.
Memes. So I think the "this is fine" meme
By the way,
resonates.
I feel like 25 people in the audience just went online. They're buying all the money.
Oh,
Like,
no.
Don't do it. Let me get in first. Just kidding.
What is happening? Okay.
We've lost control.
So, the meme of the dog holding the mug and it says "this is fine" and he's in in an inferno. And I say that one because the whole industry, like it's a nascent technology, and then it's also this new money. It's like building these new markets. So there's high highs and low lows, and the market is a roller coaster. And so in my decade at Ripple, you have to take the long view. You can't get hung up with whether it's a bull or a bear market. You have to really take that long view of what you're building toward. So this is fine resonates.
Okay. So we're going to move on to institutional use cases and adoption. What are you seeing underrated, overrated in terms of the use cases on the institutional side? Maybe we can start with you, Monica.
I think payments is still underrated. I think finally, I mean, we've been working on this use case for the better part of a decade. Within the past 1 to 2 years, we're finally seeing stablecoin payments really capturing mind share with any serious payment player in the world. And we're seeing, you know, the traction really growing, not just through market cap, but I mean, even stablecoin volumes, $25 trillion. I mean, it's still a fraction of what global FX or cross-border payments is, but we're building toward that.
Okay, and we'll double click on this in a minute or two, but yeah, clearly you're on one side of the fence.
Same question?
Yes.
Well, one of the things Monica and I talked about preparing for this is it's interesting to see where we disagree, and I'll pick one that we might disagree on.
Okay.
The institutional use case around identity, blockchain-based identity, I think is overrated. Now, let me qualify that statement. It's a beautiful vision to imagine having identity blockchain-based and being able to leverage that is a beautiful future. I love that. So that is not overrated. That's underrated. The reason why I think it's overrated as a utility and a use case is, and I frequently, maybe just for fun, I'll ask you, who owns your identity?
Yeah, it's not me, unfortunately.
It's not you. What's interesting, though, the government owns your identity.
Yep.
If you don't have a passport or a birth certificate or a driver's license, whatever, I don't know each country's dynamic, but like, if you don't have those things, you are not who you say you are.
No.
The government owns your identity. Now, we may not like that, but I just view that as, that's just a truism. And you know, one of the things Ripple has tried to do is we're pragmatic. Even though my philosophical view on something may be over here, to build a business and to drive the success of the XRP ecosystem, sometimes you just have to be pragmatic about the world. Even though I love the idea of blockchain-based identity as a utility for blockchains, you have to get government participation to really make it work, and I think that's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't think it's in pot. He is argumentative. He knew this was.
He's tricking
you. He would poke me, and then I would
baited
respond.
her.
Yeah. Which I don't think is impossible.
It's not.
And the point of like government owns our identities, so does big tech. Like this is a problem that we all face, and I do think there's such huge potential and upside toward decentralized identity and using attestations and VCs in order to make it a secure way for us to take back ownership of our identities. I agree, it's going to be a long time to get all the pieces.
I want it to happen, and Ripple might even invest in companies that are trying to do it because we want it to happen. For Ripple to pursue it, I view it as too hard to get governments to lean in and to make it work.
It's going to take a long time.
It's just, look, getting government participation. I mean, look, let's say you are successful. The other problem I see is if you have to have government participation, that means that the economics in terms of how much money you can make is also challenged because governments will regulate it into a place where there's a small margin.
Yeah.
What if you think of it as like an infrastructure component or an enabler to, so like for example, for institutions to use XRP Ledger's DEX, we're doing a bunch of work on permissioned domains and the permissioned DEX, but there's got to be a way to implement compliance to use the DEX. And so like, what if you think of it as more of a feature versus like a whole business?
Well, I still think you have to have the government participate. I mean, one of the things that informed my view of this is, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I was talking to a CEO person of a very large bank. And what he said to me was that they won't accept the KYC information, even though the Bank of Monaco or the Bank of Pat might be multi-billion or multi-trillion-dollar banks. I, as the Bank of Brad, won't accept your KYC information because if you got it wrong and then I accept yours, the impact, the negative risk to me is so high, I'm going to redo the KYC, even though I think the Bank of Pat might be well run. And so I just think, anyway, it's I think, overrated utility issue. Not that, again, the vision is so pure and so beautiful for some of the reasons Monica is highlighting. I just think it's really hard.
Okay. I love that style of discussion there.
You can imagine what our one-on-ones are like.
Yeah.
This is where I know I need to move on.
Yeah.
You can revisit it later, but this is just going to,
Okay, this is, okay, we're going to move on then. So banks issuing their own stables. Underrated, overrated? And then there's a follow-up question. So
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah.
I think that also is overrated. In some ways, we've had banks playing with this idea for a while. You know, JPM coin has been out in the world as a concept for like 6 years, I think. The challenge is if you know, JPM does this, is Citibank going to accept JPM coin? Is B of A going to accept? Is DBS? Is MUFG? You know, and so you almost need a neutral player and neutral players. And look, I think Tether is going to continue to be successful. I think USDC is going to continue to be successful. I also think there's an incredibly exciting opportunity around RLUSD. The momentum is very positive. You know, one of the things that people don't know, I've said it a little bit publicly, but there was a period of time where Ripple was minting 20% of all USDC. And so when people ask me, why did you guys jump in? You're like, well, we're already minting. We were, if not the #1 minter of USDC, we were #1 or 2. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why don't we actually lean into this market, particularly around our customer segment, around institutional use cases? And I think many people now are increasingly understanding some of our strategy around Hidden Road and how Hidden Road can really drive significant adoption in expanding the stablecoin market. We're not trying to beat USDC or Tether. I think those will continue to thrive and do well.
You can make the pie bigger, I think. Just a similar question, but not the same one. Banks having the ability to successfully issue their own stables.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing it. And I think my response in terms of under or over, it's like to be seen. I mean, Brad makes some valid points here just about, you know, how many stable coins will there be? The more USD issuers you have, you start to fragment liquidity across, you know, different issuers, different chains, different liquidity pools, et cetera. So I think what we can agree on and what we know is that the market's going to expand, you know, by multiples over the next few years, and like there will be more issuers coming to the market. I think maybe the use case with bank-issued stablecoins is especially with the large banks, where they create a network amongst themselves, and they're using their issued stables for interbank settlement. So it's just making their kind of existing kind of legacy world interbank payment settlement mechanisms more efficient through blockchain, which is probably, but we have seen some examples of that, like I think JP Morgan's efforts were based on that. And this also calls back to like our first strategy and our first go-to-market was working with the big banks on a product, called RippleNet, and we found a lot of success there. So I also know from working with those banks as customers that there is a need for this, for greater efficiency and transparency amongst them.
Yeah, no, on the grapevine, we're hearing a number of communities considering this, and the work's going on, but I think they're in the pilot stage still to really come out and talk about it. The next one then, Brad, for you is the rise of non-USD stables.
Oh, yeah. So the way I think about, I mean, obviously today, I think the market is 90 to 95% US dollar stablecoins, as we talked about, dominated by Tether and USDC. I think if I were to fast forward, as Monica described, we do at Ripple try to think in longer arcs of time. Like, sorry, what does that look like 10 years from now? I think data today would say the US dollar as a reserve currency in the world is maybe 60 to 65%. And I would assume that you would see the stablecoin market evolve similarly to that over a longer arc of time. Clearly, other reserve currency players would like to make sure that the adoption of stablecoins doesn't erode their position as a reserve currency. Today, you haven't seen that as much, in part because there are use cases around stablecoins for payments that are profound and I think will totally change corporate treasury operations in a bunch of ways. Awesome, love it. There's a lot of people who hold stablecoins because they don't want to hold the Argentinian peso and they live in Argentina. And if they can get out of that, and there are capital controls they have to manage around, but I mean, I'm picking on Argentina. I apologize to the Argentinians here, but in my lifetime, that currency's been devalued basically to zero twice. And so I'd be nervous, and they may be on a nice path now. I don't follow it as closely, but I think the demand right now is the US dollar, although it has deflated by 25% in the last 5 years, is probably the safest of the, amongst the very safest currencies.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think a lot of it boils down to necessity as well. Okay, we're going to switch a little bit here because we have 7 minutes left. I have a whole raft of questions still. Tokenization of real-world assets, and rather than ask you the underrated, overrated, I think we know it's the direction of travel. There's been a lot of discussions around this for a number of years, the last few years for sure. From your perspective, Monica, what makes the current moment feel different, and how is Ripple supporting real adoption here?
Yeah, I think it's regulatory clarity more than anything, which in some cases is, it's taken time to get to where we are in this moment, but it's never been better, that's for sure. Singapore, an early leader through MAS, providing regulatory clarity, but markets around the world, and then most recently the U.S. really opening up with the change of administration and a lot of progress, picking up momentum on legislation. And what that means is, we've worked with institutions for a very long time. I was calling back to like our first work with large banks. When you talk to the people who work on payments, work on custody within institutions, they get it. Like, they understand the value proposition and they find it compelling and they want to work with companies like ours. But the overhang or the cloudiness around how the regulators were going to treat this activity, it just wasn't worth the risk. And so I think this...
The tipping point, really.
That's the tipping point, exactly. I think that this has been really the turning point is regulatory clarity.
Okay.
It'll be slowly and then all at once.
Ah, yes. So it reminds me of that, I think it's a Hemingway quote, which is gradually, then suddenly, and trends tend to occur. You slowly start to see it, and then bang, it's either going upwards or going downwards. Okay, I was going to ask what's slowing things down, but I think you've kind of outlined that to a degree. going to quickly come back to that underrated, overrated, just for two more things. One is the Genius Act. Underrated or overrated?
Appropriately rated.
Okay, sitting on the fence.
For those of you who don't, so the Genius Act is the name of the stablecoin bill moving through the United States House. It has passed the House and now is in the Senate. I think is likely to pass, but that is focused on stablecoins, particularly not what we call market structure, which is I think also very important for the U.S., which that provides the clarity on what's a security, what's a commodity, what's a currency, those things. Hopefully we get both passed between now and August. But I feel, I mean, the momentum in Washington on these things is very good. No bill is perfect. I can point to things like, I don't love that, but
there isn't.
Perfection is the enemy of done.
Yes, yes, no, agreed. And I think the whole world is waiting and watching and anticipating, really, and what it does for the industry. I think the other bit then is market infrastructure regulation. You mentioned it yesterday. What's your view, Monica? Maybe I can pick on you.
Yeah, I mean, to Brad's point, that's the kind of the second bill prioritized for the crypto industry in the U.S. right now, and globally, other. I remember UK FCA came out with, kind of a token classification system a long time ago. Those things are helpful. Again, just the more clarity that the industry can get, then we can innovate, we can get traction, we can really move on the benefits.
Well, even if we go back to your question earlier, the big banks are not going to launch stablecoins if the Genius Act is not legislatively passed.
Yep.
Even though they may have gotten positive indications from the SEC, what have you, it's like if that doesn't pass, it's just not worth the risk to them. They're like, we'll wait. And I think that would be bad for the industry. I think it'd be bad for U.S. competitiveness. And I will give a shout out. I mean, MAS here in Singapore, but there's a number of other jurisdictions around the world that have been leaders and provided clarity early, and I think their economies have benefited from it. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Ripple, we have a pretty big office here in Singapore. We have a number of amazing leaders here who have a big impact on the region, and that's partly because there was regulatory clarity. We have licensing that is clear here.
We are grateful for your service. Okay, just then on the APAC piece, I think that's a key part of the discussion, and APAC is often described as one of the bright spots, and what's different about this region? You've mentioned MAS, but it's a collective. There is a movement occurring in Asia, and can APAC maintain its leadership position? I think there's two parts to that question. Yeah.
I think I can start. I mean, I do think that being early with clear regulation attracted a lot of the industry. Companies like us, where we were founded in the U.S., but 40–50% of our payments business flows through our Singapore hub. And so I think there's that first mover advantage, which is very sticky for countries like Singapore and Asia as a region. The other piece I'll say about Asia Pac is the pain points are acute. So where we're talking to different companies and businesses about cross-border payment needs, cost, speed, transparency, these things come up as pressing needs versus you go to the majors, US, Europe, it's a little bit different there.
The only thing I'll add is I think as a community, I mean that broadly, across Singapore, across Southeast Asia, you have a community of entrepreneurs. Like the energy that I feel being here, I mean, it's I think profound. I remember visiting Vietnam for the first time, now this is 15, 20 years ago, but just feeling the energy of the community. And look, I think everyone knows well that the crypto acceptance in South Korea, in Japan, like these are communities that are leaning into new technologies and have often, more often than not, been leaders in technology. And so I think this will continue to be a region that thrives and leads, and I think you'll see more and more faster adoption, partly as you see the US as a regulatory leader, that a lot of other countries look to the US, that I think people grossly underrated how much momentum is going to be created by the largest economy in the world finally shifting into a pro-innovation, pro-crypto posture.
Yeah, it's huge.
I mean, timing was perfect.
Whatever I ask now, I think it's all downhill from there.
This is a good place.
Just now the ending there. I think we're going to leave it at that. We're just on time as well. Can you put your hands together, please, for
Thank you.
wonderful speakers?
Thank you.